For more than 4 decades, the hostility between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the State of Israel was a conflict waged in the shadows, a dangerous and deadly game of covert operations, sabotage, and proxy warfare. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Tehran has viewed Israel as its staunchest ideological enemy, methodically building an axis of resistance through groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, to project its power without directly engaging its foe. This long undeclared war was fought with cyber attacks, such as the infamous Stuxnet virus that targeted Iran's nuclear program, and quiet assassinations of key scientists on Iranian soil. It was a perilous equilibrium, a state of contained animosity where both sides understood the unspoken rules, even as they continuously tested them in the contested landscapes of Syria, Lebanon, and cyberspace. This fragile balance, however, began to shatter under the weight of escalating provocations, moving from clandestine strikes to direct state-on-state military action. The year 2024 marked a historic and alarming turning point in this long-simmering conflict. In April, for the first time ever, Iran launched a direct assault from its own territory against Israel, unleashing a barrage of over 300 missiles and drones. While the attack was largely thwarted by a coalition of Israeli, American, and allied forces, it irrevocably broke the taboo of direct confrontation. The message was clear: the old rules no longer applied. This shift from a shadow war to an open one set the stage for a far more dangerous chapter, one where miscalculation could have catastrophic consequences for the entire region, and indeed, the world. The year continued with a grim tit-for-tat escalation, each action prompting a more forceful reaction. The assassinations of high-profile figures linked to Iran, including Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, and Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, demonstrated Israel's long reach and its willingness to strike at the heart of its adversary's leadership. In response, Iran launched another wave of missiles in October 2024, again testing Israeli defenses and signaling its undeterred resolve. This perilous cycle of violence created a new and terrifying normal. The world watched with bated breath as the two regional powers, once content to fight through intermediaries, were now locked in a direct and increasingly public struggle, inching ever closer to the abyss of all-out war with each retaliatory strike. The transition from a hidden conflict to an overt one was not just a strategic shift, it was a profound psychological one. For years, the populations in both Iran and Israel lived with the background noise of a distant threat, a conflict managed by spies and special forces. Now, the threat was immediate and tangible. Air raid sirens became a common sound in Israeli cities, and the fear of direct military strikes permeated daily life in Iran. The carefully constructed ambiguity that had prevented a full-blown war for decades had evaporated, replaced by the stark reality of ballistic missiles crossing borders. The shadow war had finally burst into the light, revealing a far more volatile and unpredictable confrontation than many had ever imagined possible. In June of 2025, the unthinkable happened. The simmering conflict erupted into a full-scale conflagration with Israel's launch of Operation Rising Lion. This was not another limited strike or a covert mission. It was a massive, coordinated air campaign designed to cripple Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure. Over 200 Israeli aircraft, a formidable display of air power, streaked across the skies to hit strategic targets deep inside Iran, striking at the very heart of the regime's power. Nuclear facilities in Natanz and Isfahan, military command centers in Tehran, and missile production sites were all targeted in a series of devastating waves. This operation represented a strategic gamble of immense proportions, crossing a red line that for years had been considered too dangerous to even contemplate. The aerial bombardment was complemented by a sophisticated campaign of sabotage on the ground, reportedly orchestrated by Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. Covert operatives and locally sourced assets allegedly activated drone swarms and other disruptive technologies to neutralize Iranian surface-to-surface missile launchers and compromise critical air defense systems before they could even react. The operation was a clear statement of intent to dismantle Iran's offensive capabilities and permanently set back its nuclear ambitions. The precision and scale of the attack stunned international observers, demonstrating a level of intelligence and operational planning that underscored the gravity with which Israel viewed the Iranian threat, deciding that the risks of inaction had finally outweighed the perils of a direct, all-out assault. Iran's response was swift, furious, and aimed directly at Israeli civilians in a flagrant act of retaliation. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps unleashed a barrage of ballistic missiles, not at military bases, but at the sprawling urban centers of Israel. Hospitals became targets, with Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba suffering a direct hit that injured dozens of patients and staff. Residential buildings in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area were also struck, sending terrified civilians scrambling for shelter. This deliberate targeting of non-combatants was designed to inflict maximum psychological terror and demonstrate that Iran, despite the damage it sustained, could still make its enemy bleed. The horrifying scenes of chaos and injury broadcast from Israeli cities marked a dark new phase in the war. The escalation to full-scale conventional warfare has plunged the Middle East into its most dangerous crisis in generations. Operation Rising Lion was not merely an attack, it was the casting of the die, a strategic decision to abandon containment in favor of direct confrontation. For Iran, the strikes on its sovereign territory were a profound humiliation, demanding a violent and sustained response to restore its deterrence and national pride. The missile attacks on Israeli cities, in turn, solidified Israeli resolve and erased any lingering domestic debate about the necessity of the operation. The two nations were now locked in a brutal cycle of violence, a formal war where the objective was no longer just to send a message, but to inflict decisive and catastrophic damage upon the other. The human cost of this escalating war is mounting with each passing day, measured in casualties, displacement, and widespread fear. In Iran, the Israeli airstrikes have killed between 200 and 450 people, a toll that includes military commanders but also top nuclear scientists, representing a devastating blow to the country's strategic programs. In Israel, dozens have been wounded by Iranian missile strikes, with foreign nationals, including Ukrainian citizens, caught in the crossfire. Beyond the immediate casualties, the psychological trauma is immense. In Tehran, the fear of further Israeli attacks has sparked a mass exodus, with reports of over 100,000 residents fleeing the capital, creating scenes of chaos on the roads leading out of the city. This humanitarian crisis has rippled across borders, forcing other nations to take drastic action to protect their citizens. India, with thousands of its nationals working and studying in Iran, launched Operation Sindhu, a complex emergency evacuation mission to bring its people home to safety. The first flights carrying terrified students have already landed in New Delhi from Armenia, a testament to the international spillover of this conflict. These evacuations underscore the grim reality that this is no longer a localized dispute. The war between Iran and Israel has become a global problem, endangering citizens from around the world and compelling governments to navigate the treacherous logistics of rescue amidst active hostilities. The economic fallout is proving to be just as alarming, threatening to destabilize an already fragile global economy. The conflict sits astride the world's most critical energy choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. With Iran threatening its closure, global energy markets have been thrown into turmoil. The price of Brent crude oil has surged, reflecting the profound anxiety over a potential supply disruption that could trigger a worldwide recession. The risk is not just theoretical. Any significant disruption to the millions of barrels of oil that pass through the strait each day would have immediate and severe consequences for consumers, businesses, and governments across the planet, from the gas pump to global supply chains. The war is also being fought on another, less visible front: cyberspace. With the escalation in physical attacks, US and other Western intelligence agencies have issued stark warnings about the growing threat of retaliatory Iranian cyber attacks. These could target critical infrastructure far beyond the Middle East, including banking systems, power grids, and healthcare facilities in Europe and North America. This digital dimension of the conflict means that no one is truly safe from its effects. The rising oil prices, the looming threat of cyber warfare, and the ever-present danger of further military escalation have trapped the world in a state of high alert, anxiously watching as the conflict's shockwaves spread ever outward. As the conflict rages, the future of the Middle East hangs precariously in the balance, with its trajectory largely dependent on the actions of one key global player, the United States. The Trump administration is currently deliberating whether to intervene directly by joining Israeli strikes, specifically targeting Iran's heavily fortified Fordow nuclear facility. A decision to do so would represent a monumental escalation, transforming the conflict from a regional war into a direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran, with unpredictable and potentially catastrophic consequences. The entire world is holding its breath, as a final decision from the White House could either pull the region back from the brink, or push it over the edge into a much wider, more devastating war. The specter of a broader regional conflict looms large. While Iran's traditional proxies and the axis of resistance have been conspicuously quiet so far, likely weakened by previous Israeli operations, their entry into the fray remains a constant threat. An all-out war could easily spill across multiple borders, drawing in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, and igniting a sectarian firestorm across the Middle East. Such a scenario would create a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions, destabilize numerous governments, and create a vacuum that extremist groups would be all too eager to fill. The risk of miscalculation is terrifyingly high, where a single errant missile or a rash decision could trigger a domino effect that no nation could control. Amidst the sounds of sirens and explosions, the calls for diplomacy have grown louder, though they seem increasingly faint. International bodies like the United Nations and concerned world powers have urged both sides to step back and seek a peaceful resolution. But these appeals have so far fallen on deaf ears. With both Iran and Israel believing they are fighting an existential battle, the space for negotiation has all but vanished. The immediate priority for global leaders is to secure a ceasefire, to halt the bloodshed and create a window for de-escalation. Without a pause in the fighting, any talk of a long-term diplomatic solution remains a distant and perhaps unattainable hope, as the logic of war continues to overwhelm the pleas for peace. Ultimately, the path forward is shrouded in profound uncertainty. Will the United States choose restraint, or will it be drawn into another Middle Eastern war? Can diplomatic efforts gain traction before the conflict spirals completely out of control? Or are we witnessing the opening salvos of a prolonged and bloody struggle that will reshape the region for decades to come? The answers to these questions are yet to be written. Today, on June 19, 2025, the fate of millions rests on a knife's edge, suspended between the slim possibility of a negotiated peace and the terrifying momentum of a war that threatens to consume everything in its path. The stakes could not be higher.